Well, good morning slash afternoon, wherever you may be. We recognize that we have folks joining us from across the US and Canada and Europe and afar as well. Welcome to Canvas. My name is Brett Nachman. I am with the College Autism Network as its Director of Research. Many of you I know have joined us for prior Canvas meetings. This is the College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars. We have researchers, educators, practitioners, self-advocates, community members, and many more who have connections to the autism community. As part of this space, we hold these meetings monthly. Many of you know that we did take a break in June per normal. And we have an exciting slate of meetings ahead over the coming months. And today we'll be joined by Dr. Amelia Anderson at Old Dominion University, who'll be talking about autism and academic libraries, a relatively niche area that I think is rather compelling, and I imagine will be probably very fascinating for so many of you as well. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. For those of you who have been on Canvas in the past, we encourage you to use the chat however you would like. Please, if you want to throw in a question or a comment verbally, you're welcome to do so. We just ask that you have your microphone muted when you're not speaking so as to reduce background noise. Also, too, if you haven't already, to please put your name in the agenda and highlight it just as a way on our end to make sure that you are in attendance and that we have that documented. I'll be dropping that again in the chat for folks to access. Yeah, and if you have any questions or contributions, feel free to put those in the chat. We'd like to start off Canvas meetings with a little icebreaker to kind of engage a little bit. We recognize that this can be a bit more of a passive experience, but we want it to be as interactive as possible. So I'm going to drop in a question in the chat. What is a good movie, TV show, or book that you have watched so far this summer? Because we realize that many folks are using these months as a space to catch up on a lot of good content. So if anybody has fun resources of entertainment to check out, this is a great time to do so. I see Susan has written down Cajillionaire. That's quite an interesting title. Austin referenced Ted Lasso. I believe that's on Apple TV Plus. Erin said a book called Killers of the Flower Moon. Sarah mentioned a six-part series on Peacock called We Are Lady Parts. Caroline said Castlevania. Allison mentioned Mythic Quest on Apple TV. Boy, we're just going with all the streaming services, I see. Lynn mentioned A Million Little Things, yep, TV show on ABC. Jennifer mentioned a book edited by Alice Wong called Disability Visibility. Joe mentioned Dickinson on Apple TV Plus. A lot of Apple TV Plus fans I see here. Alex mentioned Coercion and Its Fallout by Murray Sidman. Brad mentioned The Good Place. Yep. Pam mentioned history podcasts, if that counts. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about all types of entertainment. Knives Out. Amelia mentioned Transparent. A lot of people like Ted Lasso here, so I think we have some Apple TV Plus subscribers. So a lot of good recommendations for folks. I'm going to throw out the massive Disney fan that I am, Cruella, which is on Disney Plus or in theaters, and I find that to be very entertaining with Emma Stone and Emma Thompson. Lots of good picks, folks, so I imagine you have a lot of things to check out over the weekend. Just to go over a few things on our Canvas meeting agenda. If you aren't already, please make sure that you are subscribed to our Canvas listserv. This is how you often hear about our Canvas meetings, as well as recordings from our meetings, like the one that you'll see today. Also, too, people are exchanging resources. We see a lot of instances of folks disseminating calls for participants for research studies. So this is a really good tool toward that end. And certainly if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop me an email. And thank you for dropping that in, Brad. Also too, we want to really reference to folks that our College Autism Summit, once again virtually, is very much around the corner. It is the end of October, and while that may seem like several months away from now, what is very impending is our call for proposals. And we really encourage folks to submit a proposal. We have a variety of different options in terms of what folks' areas of expertise are or interests. We really welcome a variety of perspectives, and given that it is virtual, this enables folks to be able to join us across time zones. We have content that is in real time, but we have it in the afternoons on Eastern time to make sure that we can accommodate folks on the West Coast, as well as folks joining us in Canada and Europe, and hopefully in other spaces as well. So we really encourage you to submit a call for proposal. You will get hopefully good feedback from our team of reviewers, and more than that, you know that you're in a community of folks who want to support your work and efforts, and hopefully give a lot of ideas along the way. We have a few really big keynote speakers, including many of you may have heard of Lydia X.C. Brown. They're a very popular speaker in the disability justice world. So really lucky to have them as our opening keynote. Then also we'll have DJ Savarese, who will be talking about, as listed in the title, My Self-Determined Journey Through College and Beyond. And DJ is also an activist and public speaker. So we're really glad to have these perspectives from the autism community as our main keynotes. So and we welcome many of you to be there, whether as presenters or participants, perhaps in both roles. So please stay tuned to what will be on the docket on our website, and certainly submit a proposal if you feel so inclined. We would definitely welcome your interest. At this point in our Canvas meeting, prior to our main presenter, we allocate a bit of space for folks to share resources with one another. You can drop them in the chat. You can speak about them verbally. You can put them in the meeting agenda if that's easier too. What we do is we catalog this and put this in our meeting minutes. I know there are a few pieces listed currently in the chat, or excuse me, in the meeting agenda. So I'll let the individual who crafted those take it away, and feel free to drop some things in as they come about.
So I was the guy who dropped in these two articles, so I'll just briefly touch on them. The first, the Goddard article, it's from the UK. There's 10 students who participated in it, and it was largely about their kind of social experiences and expectations. It's honestly very, very similar to a lot of other studies that have been interview in Nature, 10 or 20 students, and it is essentially reaffirming what those other studies have been saying, is that there are some social anxieties and discomforts and a sense of disconnection with a number of peers on campus, and it speaks to some of both the personal and the institutional or other people factors that have contributed to that that situation. And then the second one I dropped in there, which I'll put here. Whoa, I don't know why they're doing that. I'm going to try again to drop it in. This is an article from, and I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce the name, so I'm just going to type it rather than demonstrate my own ignorance with names. Yeah, I'm still going to stop. I wasn't wanting to try it, but I'm going to pass. But this, though it's not specifically about college students per se, it actually hits on a topic that I don't think gets a ton of coverage, but specifically on women and the social camouflaging and how that, and I think one of the things that caught me on the article is, one, it's a systematic review, so it helps summarize a bunch of other stuff, but in particular, it spoke to kind of like the dual cost and benefit of doing so, and that there was real benefit to the social camouflaging in terms of some of the kind of outcomes and meeting expectations, but then there was kind of a psychological and personal identity kind of cost associated with that as well. And I think those are both things that we ought to keep in mind, particularly as we consider the like that first article that talks about the social challenges in college for students. So those are two that just happened to cross my desk in the last couple of weeks that I thought were relevant to the work that we tend to do here.
Thank you, Brad. It's always good to know about new pieces that have debuted. Any other folks want to chime in with resources or things to share with the community? Patrick, I'll read your comment aloud unless you would like to. Patrick mentions the neurodiversity peer support group that I facilitate recently sent some recommendations to the UC Academic Senate, and we heard that they were endorsed. So hopefully at least some of those will be implemented by campus administrators. Very good. That's great.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yep,
now?
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was just having some issues in the audio. Yeah, I can. So there were pretty wide recommendations in response to Brad's question. Disability cultural centers, neurodiversity trainings, recognizing that this is not just an accommodations issue, but also a DEI issue. Like it's got both the functional limitation and DEI aspects to it. Transition supports in, out, flexibility of communication modalities, if people don't want to telephone somebody, that sort of thing. So it was fairly sweeping. Of course, it's not exactly binding on the campus administrations, but hopefully it'll lead to some positive changes.
Thank you for sharing, Patrick. That's definitely encouraging. I also know, looking in the chat, it looks like Amber mentioned researching students with autism who are also in dual credit classes, Student Voice Lens. If you'd like to give more context to that, you're welcome to do so, Amber.
Thank you. I'm currently researching a field that I haven't found much in the literature. Because we know that students with autism are underrepresented in higher education, and we know that dual credit helps increase success in higher education. So I found a small subset of students who both have experiences with autism and experiences with dual credit. So I'm in the process now of conducting some research to find their voice and what works with them from the instructor point of view, from their peer point of view, from instructional course design point of view. And that's what I'm researching right now.
That's wonderful. Are there resources that you're seeking from the Canvas community or questions that you'd like to pose to folks?
If you know any of this 0.0000001% of students, I'm going to put something out on the listserv as soon as I get that cleared. I've got the IRB approved, but I need to just clear that with my other researcher, and then I'll put out a request for if you know anybody who meets these criteria, if they want to be involved in the study.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for letting everybody know about that.
Thank you.
Any other contributions from members of the community? It's always good to hear about new research emerging. Okay, well, if other thoughts emerge, feel free to drop that in the chat. Certainly keep that dialogue going. At this point, I'll turn it over to our main presenter for today, Dr. Amelia Anderson, whose work I followed for quite a while, and we're really glad to have Amelia here. Dr. Anderson is the assistant professor of Library and Informational Studies at the Darden College of Education and Professional Studies at Old Dominion University. Often these titles of colleges and entities are very long, but that's how academia works, I suppose. Certainly, Amelia, as you can probably glean from the list of articles that are featured in the agenda, has published quite a lot on this front. Yeah, we're really glad to get some perspective into the world of autism and libraries. So I'll let you take it away. And we'll have time for Q&A as well. I just want to throw that out there to folks. Q&A, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll also have time toward the end of the hour toward addressing those orally and in real time. So take it away, Amelia.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And I, honestly, there's even more to my title than what, what you already said. It is amazing how many words they can pack into a department name. But yeah, essentially, I am a former public librarian and now a researcher in the world of libraries. And along the way, I kind of fell into autism research and actually worked with Brad Cox while I was a doctoral student at Florida State, and just really kind of found my groove. And I remember when I got started, one of the actually an autistic librarian that I met along the way some years back told me, he said, well, this could be a career for you. You could, I had maybe written one or two things, and he said, this could be your entire career. And I laughed about it. I said, oh, that's, this is good for now. But it's turned into that, it's almost like an onion, like layered. It's like, I'll do one thing and then it'll say, it'll turn into like, well, there's so much more there to discover. What else needs to be done? And then I kind of peel that back, and then there's another layer. And so here I am, some years later. I think it's been maybe 8 years, 7 years that I've been, is that right? Maybe, that I've been kind of on this path, and it's just one thing leads to another and to another. And it is turning into my career, and it's amazing. And I'm so thankful. I think there's just so much that needs to be done. So let me attempt to share my screen. I think I found a workaround here to do a portion of a screen. Perfect, yay, okay. So I kind of looked back at your meeting minutes for previous meetings, and just to get an idea of how to go with this. And I have published quite a bit in autism in libraries, and part of that is specific to college students, and some of that is a little bit more broad. But what I wanted to do today is kind of do a broad overview of that intersection, and not go too deep into the weeds with specific studies. That being said, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I also realize that some of the studies that I shared with you are not open access, which as a librarian makes me very angry. But I have those, and I'm happy to share the PDFs with the group as well. So that way, if you do want to kind of get into the details of, all the methodology and whatnot, you can have access to that too. So, I'll share that with the group, however you guys share documents. And please also questions along the way. I'm very happy to kind of, if you want to chime in, and if I don't see it in the chat, Brett, you can just kind of wave your hand or something and I can address. So essentially autism in libraries, it's very niche, right? You wouldn't probably think about it unless you're somebody who works in that specific area, which I think it makes it so important that you guys have invited me in to kind of share this, because there is a lot of intersection. And I think it is important to note that. So for me, I came upon this when I was a graduate student, and Florida State had received a grant to study training for librarians about autism. And so when I worked on this grant, what I realized was that we were so concerned with children. And so when I say librarians, this can be school librarians in K-12, this can be public librarians, this can be academic librarians. So this grant that I was on, Project PALS, they were very, very concerned about the children aspect, which of course is very important. But what I realized was, hey, this is not something that goes away. These children become adults, and then what do we do? And so that really sparked my interest in seeing what came next. And so my dissertation was about college students, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And that was a really interesting project that I did, which led to another grant developing a training manual for academic librarians to better understand and serve college students who were autistic. And that's Project A+. So then after that, I've kind of gone in more of a, other directions. And this is all based on conversations I've had, findings, things like that. Now I'm looking at employment, which means, after various conferences, I would present my research about autism to these librarians, specifically about training librarians to understand patrons, the customers who are autistic. And inevitably, I would have librarians come up to me after these sessions and say, hey, the work you're doing is so important, I'm autistic. And so I kind of started to see this pattern of, well, hey, there's a lot of autism in the profession. I mean, there's a lot of autism everywhere, right? But I was starting to see this kind of connection of librarianship and autism, and it just made sense to me. So I thought, well, that deserves a little more exploration. So I've been recently looking at autism in the profession and what our classes, let me back up a little bit. To be a librarian, you have to have a graduate degree. So autistic librarians are very educated. They go through college once, they come back through college again. So what does that education look like for them? What's missing? What more needs to be done to prepare them and retain them in the field? And then one more thing about school librarians, again, kind of tying into college and education. What are we doing to educate school librarians as well? So this is all, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I want to share with you specifically 3 studies that I think would be interesting for you in particular. And I'll go through them kind of quickly. And again, like I said, I'm happy to dig a little deeper into any of them that you are particularly interested in. So this first one is an older one, and so I'll try to remember all the details, but this is based on my dissertation. This is kind of where it all got started for me. And this is an open access paper. It's also in the ODU repository, so you should be able to access it easily. And this one, the research questions were essentially, how do students with autism, and let me stop there too. I have kind of evolved in my language. And so my record of scholarship reflects that. And so earlier works I use with autism, and now I have shifted to autistic, for what it's worth, just putting that out there. So in this paper, I wanted to know how students with autism described their experiences in the academic library in an online community of their peers. So what I did was I actually looked at the site Wrong Planet, which I think you might be familiar with. Brad and I actually did some work there as well. And Wrong Planet was particularly important for me in this study because I wanted to know, number one, if college students, if autistic college students were talking about the library at all. First, is there anything there? Like, do they care about the library? Are they using it? Are they talking about it? So I just did some very simple keyword searches, and they were. I saw libraries pop up quite a bit. So then I thought, okay, well then let's see what they're saying. And it was important to me to pull the data from Wrong Planet because it kind of circumvented a lot of issues that may arise with communication. And so this to me was very unobtrusive. It was not me driving the conversation or really, just driving it in any way. It was just kind of organically picking up what was already there, what was already being said. And to me, that was really important because this was very exploratory. Nobody had done a lot of work with college students, autistic college students in academic libraries. It is very specific, I realized that. So I just wanted to see what was out there and what they were saying. So let's see. So this was, I had, 170 discussion threads that I collected that met the sampling criteria. And then I read each one of those thoroughly to make sure that it actually met what I was looking for, that they were talking about specific academic libraries. So this was college students talking about their academic library. And from that, I got to 98 discussion threads. in which college students were talking about their academic library. So just kind of quickly running through what I found there. So I found they spoke quite a bit about the sensory environment. No surprise there. They also talked about study rooms. And so they used the study rooms quite a bit, but there were barriers in that many academic libraries are, they're trying to move to this, like, we're so cool, we're so hip, come to the library, which is wonderful. However, a lot of students still have the association of the library as a quiet space and kind of as an escape. Actually, the article that Brad mentioned just a few minutes ago about the social anxiety and that kind of thing, you know, a lot of them talked about wanting to go to the library as kind of a hideaway, you know, especially those who lived in dorms. And yet they got to the library, and the library is now like, yay, we have all of these collaborative spaces and, you know, kind of fun events and things, which for a student who is looking for a room where they can close a door and just kind of have a little bit of quiet space, that is overwhelming. And libraries still have those spaces, but what I found was that they don't mark them. So there's not the clear signage when you first get to the library that says, you know, hey, this entrance might be very overwhelming. I know there's a lot going on, but go up to the second floor and we've got study rooms where you can close a door. So students who aren't familiar with the library, who haven't had that exposure to it, might be turned away, might be turned off. You know, they get to the front and they think, well, this isn't the quiet library that I was expecting. It could be a barrier to them. So that's kind of all of the environmental stuff combined there. You know, some of the students talked about wanting to use the library to kind of have that quiet space, and others talked about getting there and feeling burdened by it being too quiet, and that they wanted to stim and make noise, and they felt kind of uncomfortable that it was quiet. So it's a delicate balance there. There's not really a clear idea of what the library should be, but to me, it was more indicative of that we need all of those spaces in the library, but we need to have signage that tells people where to go to find what kind of space. I also found that, again, no surprise, these students like to go to the library to research their special interests, that they kind of found not company, but found kind of solace in going to the library and burying their nose in a book and really digging deep into their interests. But they also really enjoyed browsing, just stumbling upon things on the shelves. Finally, I found that kind of interestingly, they talked about using their knowledge of the library to support communication and interaction. So those students who were kind of the library nerds, for lack of a better word, I am one myself, it's not a bad thing, that they would see other students in the library and kind of use their knowledge to initiate conversations, you know, to say, oh, hey, I see that you might be lost. Can I help you find X, Y, and Z? So I thought that was really interesting as well. And then again, it was really gray area about whether they went to the library to interact or to avoid interaction. And again, no clear answer, but very strong opinions from both sides. Some people went to the library because there were special events where they could kind of geek out around things like Pokemon Go or Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Libraries do have programs to bring students in. And so some of these autistic students really appreciated that they could hang out with a group of people that had similar interests to them in kind of a structured environment like the library. And then others said that they wanted to go to the library to just be left alone, and, you know, the librarian tried to talk to me and, you know, that kind of thing. So all that to say, this study did not have like a clear, this is the way a library should be. Instead, it led me more into the idea that, you know, libraries need to be flexible and they need to be responsive. And really the signage aspect was really important, I think, to let people know that there was availability of different things for different people and letting them know how to get to those places. So all of that led to this, which is Project A+. And this is a grant that I worked on as a lowly graduate assistant, but it was based on my dissertation. And we developed a training, and it's a PDF manual. It's free to download. So if you want to go to the website there to check it out, you're welcome to. And this is specifically for academic librarians. And it's based on the study I just told you about. And, you know, it really seemed to us at the time that there was just no awareness from academic librarians about serving students who were autistic. And so this was a starting point. And, you know, I said that my terminology has grown. Even looking back at this project, I see things that I would have written differently. But it's still something I'm very proud of. I think we have really kind of started at least the conversation for academic librarians. Because the truth is, you know, obviously, as you guys know, you know, the students are there. And so the libraries need to step up. You know, librarians, we say that we serve our community. And this is a demographic. This is, you know, members of our community that so many librarians just aren't even really aware that that they exist in such numbers, I guess. And so this was kind of our effort to say, yes, it's there, and we need to do better. So from that, developed the next study that I wanted to share just a little bit about. This one, I believe, is Behind a Firewall. This is not open access, I think. So if you have trouble accessing this, I'm happy to share it. So when we were doing our work with Project A+, we heard, so this was specifically with librarians at Florida State, and they kept asking us, well, what do other librarians do? You know, what kind of collaboration is happening at other campuses for other academic librarians? And we didn't really have the answer to that. So that shaped this next study, in which I tried to find examples of good collaborations between academic libraries and services for autistic college students. So this one was very interesting. I did a year-long just Google keyword search to see any mentions of college or academic libraries and autism. And I looked through scholarly journals, and I identified 45 institutions that are college and universities, not specific to autism, that had some sort of an autism program on their campus. And then I reached out to each one of them and asked them if they had any kind of relationship or support from their campus libraries. So of those, I got multiple people say, no, we don't even communicate with the libraries. What are you talking about? But what I did find that was really interesting is a lot of the representatives came back and said, well, we don't, but it's interesting you should mention that, maybe we should. And so even before the study started, and these people did not meet the sampling frame because they didn't have a relationship with the libraries, but me just mentioning that to them kind of triggered, well, that's interesting. Maybe we should reach out to our campus libraries to see what they can do. So I thought that was really great. It actually opened up a lot of conversations about it, that, you know, people were just interested in the study and interested about what the library could do, and that they would be interested in helping. So all that to say, from that, I found all of 4 institutions that not only had an autism, some sort of a cohort or groups, support group on their campus, but also involved the library in some sort of meaningful way in that group. So this is, these are the 4 programs that I found, code names, of course. And this is all in the paper, so I won't linger too long, but I spoke to a few librarians. I spoke to a few representatives from the autism support programs, and just essentially picked their brains about what exactly those collaborations look like. So just kind of quickly what I found here, the most prominent theme that I found that I was really pleased to find is that they mentioned that these collaborations must support the students' needs. So I think so often we talk about collaboration because it's what we should be doing. But I thought it was really meaningful and impactful that that the people I spoke with said, yeah, we should collaborate, but only if it's actually serving the students. So this is a quote that that I think kind of reflects that, saying that, yeah, the partnership is great. What can we do instead of let's advertise it and make sure they show up? So I thought that was really, really interesting. Another thing I found was that awareness comes first. And, you know, I know for me, acceptance is paramount, but so many people I spoke with said that, you know, we're just not aware of each other. You know, the librarians are not aware of these groups, and the groups are not aware that the librarians are willing and able to help out in any way. They spoke about the physical space in the library, and I mentioned that a little bit in the last study. So a lot of the groups said, yeah, we take our students to the library, but that's it. You know, we bring them into the study rooms or the meeting rooms. But many of them, well, there are 6 total participants, but of those 6, many of them said that, yeah, they've got the physical space, but we want to move beyond that and see what else we can provide for the students. They also talked about tailored services that, you know, adhering to principles of universal design and general inclusion is really important. And yet for some students, it's still important to get to know them and provide a more tailored experience for them. And then there are suggestions for institutions that did not have an autism support program were essentially about encouraging disclosure, which is such a tough, a tough thing. And also about just educating those on campus about the library's willingness to support and ability to provide, you know, additional services. And the disclosure piece, you know, I'll just say, you know, for the institutions that do have a support program, it's a little bit different because they know who's in the group and they know, you know, who they can tailor services for. But students who are at, you know, large universities that are not a part of one of these cohorts, you know, librarians are a little bit, you know, overwhelmed with, well, what do we do to start? How do we know what services to provide? So then moving on, the last one I wanted to really talk about, and this is my most recent work. So one of them is available. I think this one is also behind a paywall. And the other one will be open access. It's currently in the copy editing phase right now. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning, is that, you know, so much of what I do, I present to librarians about autism, and then, you know, they talk to me afterwards and disclose that they're autistic. So I've developed quite a network and, you know, quite a few friendships from this. And so, you know, just seeing kind of the experiences that they have in job seeking and, you know, honestly, along the way, I've become kind of an informal career coach to some librarians who will reach out to me and just ask me, you know, how to prepare for an interview, things like that. So that kind of led to this work that was just like, well, on a larger scale, what do these experiences look like for autistic librarians? What's the job seeking process look like? What's their daily workforce experience look like? So that was this study, and it's a 2-part study here. One is the methodology behind it, and one is the actual qualitative themes that resulted. The methodology in particular was important for me to highlight because I tried to use very inclusive practices. I offered, so it was all interviews, qualitative interviews, but I offered options in how they participated in those interviews. And so each participant was able to choose from a menu of options. They could do a Zoom with audio and video, a Zoom with just audio. They could do a Zoom with just chat. They could talk over the phone. And they could also do just a text written communication. And so that was, I thought, a really important piece to the study to allow them to communicate in the way they best felt would provide their experiences, their lived experiences. I didn't edit their language. And so, I had a participant who would repeat words. And I didn't edit that, and I made sure that that was acceptable before I sent anything to be published, because I wanted the language and the communication to be reflective of how these participants were communicating with me. I did a lot of member checks. I sent, early drafts to all participants, and I was very clear about saying, respond to me by Friday at 5 p.m. if you have any concerns about this, or this. I made edits based on their suggestions. I allowed them to choose their pseudonyms, how they wanted to be portrayed. And a couple of them actually said that because they felt strongly about being self-advocates, they wanted to use their real name, which is another thing that doesn't happen very often in research. And, we had some conversations about that to make sure that was really what they were comfortable with. And so, that's this first paper is really kind of a behind the scenes look at all of those factors. And the second one is the actual themes that emerged. And I see that it's already 11:46. So I'm going to kind of just run through those themes quickly. And again, I'm happy to share all these with you afterwards. So I'll kind of highlight the ones I found the most interesting. So disclosure, obviously context oriented, and it varies by individual and circumstance. There are barriers, accommodations, and accessibility concerns. This is all stuff that you guys probably already know, so I'm going to skip to the things that I found especially interesting. They talked about prioritizing their skills, and how if they are in a job interview, instead of doing some kind of a meaningless presentation, they should be showing their actual skills, like what they would be using on the job. So for academic librarians, it's very similar to a faculty interview in which you do a presentation. And some of these academic librarians, or I guess all librarians, aren't actually going to be teaching. There's a lot of roles. And so if you're not teaching for your job, why should you be required to stand up in front of a committee and give a presentation? So they talked about that quite a bit. They really like helping. So these librarians talked about how what was really the most interesting for them in their career was helping patrons. They did have expectations for managers that they had some knowledge about autism. This one's interesting. A lot of them found their way into the profession because they were library users themselves. And so they found the library to be kind of a comfortable environment for them. And so they thought, well, this could be a career. That's important to me because we all know that, unemployment for autistic adults is pretty grim. And so for people to find their niche, to find their way into a career that is welcoming and comfortable for them, I think is really critical. So again, this kind of leads into the next one, is that in librarianship, they found like-minded people. I think librarians are a very interesting bunch myself. I love the field. I think the people are just so interesting and great. And so that was kind of reflected in this finding. And then finally, that the work that they do as librarians is fulfilling. One thing I found really interesting is a lot of these librarians talked about how they were public servants. And so they actually work with the public. We're not talking about people who are behind the scenes doing shelving books, kind of meaningless rote tasks. That's great, that there's a place for that. But I think this is reflective in that there are so many other roles, and you can't assume that because a person is autistic, they are going to thrive in, a specific position. And so many of, I interviewed a children's librarian who does story times and, is on stage essentially all day with little kids, and he's autistic, and has not disclosed because he thinks that that does not really jive with the persona of a children's librarian. And even more interesting to me is that every person that I interviewed who said something like that said, but I'm very unique. I know this is, other people don't, other autistic librarians, this wouldn't be their cup of tea. But there were multiple that I talked to. So I thought, oh, well, you guys really need to meet each other and know that there's actually a community of people out there. So that's kind of it. Obviously, there's a lot more. There's a few more studies that I've done that are linked and that I think we sent you. But those were the ones that I thought really would be most interesting to you all. And forgive me for not going too deep on any one of them, but I thought maybe broad overview of all of the above might be a little more interesting. And yeah, I'm happy to talk through any of them if you have questions.
Thank you so much. That was very as thorough as it could be given the time constraints, and I think a really good perspective into the different facets that you've uncovered. I would definitely encourage folks to drop in the chat now or over the next few minutes regarding any questions you may have. There is one already from your former colleague, Brad, who asks, could you talk more about the pragmatics of using data submitted in such diverse ways? Did you find it easier to analyze one type of data? Did you convert everything to a common base? Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, so what's actually pretty interesting is even given all of the options, most people chose to do the Zoom with audio and video. So I actually only had two types of data submitted, and it was the Zoom, and it was the just basic Microsoft Word fill in the blanks document and return it to me. So I ended up really only with two types, even though I had a whole menu of options. And there's, who knows what the reasoning behind that is. I did some purposive sampling. So some of the participants knew me already, so I think they were comfortable with speaking to me on camera. But again, some of the participants that I know and am friendly with submitted by Microsoft Word document. So I'm not sure. But yeah, essentially what I did was with the Zoom, I transcribed, so everything was Word document. It was semi-structured interviews, and so they all had the same basic set of 10 questions. I found with the Zoom interviews, I was able to ask follow-up questions. And we said that I would do that in the Microsoft Word document as well, but I just found that format is not really conducive to so many follow-up questions, so I just didn't find myself doing that as much. So I did feel like I got more robust data from the Zoom interviews, but I also know that some participants probably may not have spoken out as much in Zoom, and so maybe what I got from them in the Word documents was more robust than what they would have given me in Zoom, if that makes sense. But yeah, essentially it all ended up being a Word document, so I was able to analyze it that way. And yeah, Pam, so Erin, correct. College majors, the beautiful thing about library studies is that it's a graduate degree, and we welcome anybody, really. And in librarianship, particularly in academic librarianship, if you have a degree in something that is totally unrelated to literacy, libraries, what have you, it actually makes you more marketable often, because there are subject-specific librarians. And so, you know, you could be the liaison to your college's East Asian Studies program. And so having, you know, a bachelor's degree relative to that might actually help you. Yeah, so really, whatever your interest is, that's a good major for a graduate degree, which I think, again, is really attractive for autistic students because they can focus, you know, on whatever they're interested in, and then become a librarian and really dig deeply. It's almost like a faculty position, and that you're able to kind of to focus in on your specific area. Yay, there are librarians here. This is so exciting. Yeah, so Erin at UNT, they're faculty members. And public librarianship is a little bit different, and school librarianship obviously too. But again, for that, it's really whatever background you bring to the table is, you're welcome.
That's pretty awesome news, Tanner. Whoops, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just reading the chat here, and social sciences librarian, background in mental health therapy.
It's great to have this perspective on this Canvas call. Amelia, could you, recognizing that I'll kind of fill some silence right now because I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'd certainly encourage if there's anybody else to throw in a question or two. But one question that stemming from that really thorough guide that you developed for academic librarians, are there maybe like one or two main takeaways that you could relate to folks here on the call in terms of how they can work with their colleagues at their libraries in terms of providing more inclusive environments? Like if there's something that stands out to you, what's something that any of us could relate at our respective organizations or institutions?
You know, I think the biggest thing to me is getting the conversation started, that you're interested in collaboration. You know, every campus is very different, but I think that that librarians often get kind of forgotten about as a piece in that mix. I was going to say puzzle, but so I think that that just knowing that that librarians are receptive and interested in being kind of a partner in those collaborations is key. That's really the biggest thing to me. That's number one. That's where I would start. Because like I said, with that one study, when I reached out and I said, you know, hey, what are your experiences with librarians on campus? And so many of them said, well, we don't have experience, but hey, that's cool. You know, let us know what happens with your study. So I think that was the big takeaway for me there, is that you really go ahead and reach out and see what collaboration can be done. I think too, you know, one thing that I was going to mention that I didn't get to yet, just about, you know, my own work, and maybe you all have ideas about this too, is that for me, it's been an interesting journey, and it's one in which I still kind of wrestle with the kind of coming from a place of, so I consider myself neurotypical, and you know, what happens next with this research, right? As I move towards kind of more awareness and understanding myself, and I think, you know, the idea of own voices is really important. And, you know, I do what I can to amplify neurodivergent voices, but I also am coming to a point where I wonder, you know, if it's time for me to take a step back, or if my voice is still kind of necessary in this work. And I would guess others in the room have similar experiences, maybe, but just that's kind of my growth here is what happens from here, and how can I still be an ally and amplify the experiences without overshadowing.
That's perhaps a very poignant note to end on. And I just want to recognize too that there's a number of comments that really reflect individuals' engagement in their reflective library spaces, and thinking about how the environments that librarians and colleagues cultivate can help allow for just comfortable setting. So really appreciate you providing this foundation and for all of us. And so yeah, very much appreciate your time, Dr. Anderson. So certainly Amelia's work is many. If you feel free to share the pieces with me, and I can get those disseminated on our listserv via alongside the meeting minutes, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all so much for having me. And I'm hoping, now that I'm aware that, again, awareness comes first, right? Now that I'm aware that you guys are having these meetings, I hope to drop in more often. This is a really amazing group.
Absolutely. And I think illustrated in the comments, I was reading through some of them in terms of folks, individuals in this community who are connected to the autism community or self-advocates themselves, and recognizing just the vitality of libraries and their own experiences and for people connected to them. So I think you are definitely hitting on some valuable points. Well, I recognize we are nearing the hour mark. So certainly appreciate everybody for joining us today. You will see the meeting minutes as well as video recording from today in your email inbox later next week. And please definitely stay tuned. We have a whole lot of great content in store for everybody over subsequent months. In August for Canvas, we're going to be on Friday, August 13th, Dr. Jane McLeod from Indiana University will be our main presenter, and more details, of course, will be relayed via email. So we look forward to seeing you all then, and in the meantime, engaged on our Canvas listserv. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.